Hare Krishna. We welcome all the participants for today's webinar. We are extremely fortunate and blessed to have among us today the most loved Arjun Sakhā Prabhuji. Is a diksha disciple of His Holiness Radha Govind Goswami Maharaj, who is a senior disciple of Srila Prabhupada, very well known for his classes on the Srimad Bhagavatam. We know him also to be the younger brother of a very dear His Grace Amarendra Prabhuji, who has been also bestowing his kind mercy upon us through practical spirituality. Academically, Arjun Sakhā Prabhuji holds a master's in information systems from New Jersey and spiritually holds a Bhakti Shastri degree from ISKCON Chowpatty, Mumbai. He has been actively preaching in many ISKCON centers around the world and has especially been cultivating the youth at ISKCON Seattle. Prabhuji expresses his immense gratitude to Sripad Aindra Prabhu and Sripad Bhakti Swarup Damodar Swami Maharaj for inspiring him on this path of Krsna Bhakti. All his past lectures can be viewed at his channel, Arjun Sakhā Das. So without any further delay, we would now like Prabhuji to kindly enlighten us on today's topic. Hare Krishna.
Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Namayom Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadhi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Gurave Gaurachandraya Radhikaya Dadaliye, Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya, Tadbhaktaya Namo Namaha, Ananda Lilamaya Vigrahaya, Hemavadivya Chavisundaraya, Tasmai Mahaprema Rasa Pradaya, Chaitanya Chandraya Namo Namaste, Chaitanya Chandraya Namo Namaste, Chaitanya Chandraya Namo Namaste. Hare Krishna. Before I begin, I would want to express my gratitude to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, because of whose mercy and because of whose efforts we are all gathered here today to discuss something practical, because I was asked to speak something practical. The channel is Practical Spirituality. So we will be trying to speak something practical. Of course, today's discussion will be a little different from the discussions we have had in the past. We will not be diving too deep into the Shastra, because I was asked to speak on a topic which the youth can relate to, not something very deep, but more of superficial, which the present day generation can kind of understand. So I want to express my gratitude to the whole team of Practical Spirituality, Brajavallabi Mataji, and everyone who's involved with Practical Spirituality for very kindly inviting me over for this session. And lastly, I want to thank all the devotees, all the newcomers, all the youths, all the adults, and all the devotees present from not just the US, but also from India and all the different parts of the world. I really want to thank all of you all for very kindly joining in. And before I begin, I just want to seek all your blessings so that I can speak some favorable words in the glorification of today's topic. Mancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namo. Also, before we begin, just a small request. If we can turn on our videos, because with the videos off, what happens is it seems I'm just speaking to a blank screen. But if you can kindly turn on our videos, then I can at least see some individuals. It becomes easier for the speaker when he can see faces of few of the audience. So that's just a kind request. And now I'll just like to share my screen. Can someone confirm if the screen is visible?
Yes, Prabhuji, it's quite visible.
Thank you. So this is the 7th canto of a sacred literature called as the Srimad Bhagavatam, also called as Bhagavat Puran. And as we know, the Srimad Bhagavatam has 12 cantos in it. And this is one of the cantos which is called as the Signs of God. And this is the 6th chapter from that canto, text 1. Now, what is the scenario here? Who is the speaker? Well, the speaker here is Prahlad Maharaj. As we know, Prahlad Maharaj is the son of the demon Hiranyakashipu, to kill whom the Supreme Lord advented as Sri Narsinghadev. And why are we discussing this section and why especially this verse? Because the speaker is Prahlad Maharaj, who is a youth. Where is this being discussed? In a school where we have all been to or we are still going to. And Prahlad Maharaj is discussing this verse or giving this instruction in the school to his friends. So we all have had friends in the past. We are all having friends right now. We have all been to the school, and most of us are in the phase of youth. So this is a topic which is very much relevant because Prahlad Maharaj is also a youth. He's also in the school and he's also discussing this with his friends. So here Prahlad Maharaj says, Shri Prahlada Uvacha Kaumara Acharet Pragyo Dharman Bhagavatan Iha Durlabham Manusham Janma Tad Api Adhruvam Artadam. I chant the verse once more. Shri Prahlada Uvacha Kaumaram Acharet Pragyo Dharman Bhagavatan Iha Durlabham Manusham Janma Tad Api Adhruvam Artadam. Translation. Prahlad Maharaj said, one who is sufficiently intelligent should use the human form of body from the very beginning of life. In other words, from the tender age of childhood or youth, to practice the activities of devotional service, giving up all other engagements. The human body is most rarely achieved, which is Durlabham Manusham Janma. And although temporary, like other bodies, it is meaningful because in human life, one can perform devotional service. Even a slight amount of sincere devotional service can give one complete perfection. It's very interesting. Here we find Prahlad Maharaj is using the word Kaumara. And Prabhupada translates Kaumara as the tender age of childhood or the age of youth. Now, Sanskrit is such a beautiful language that every phase of life has been given a particular term. And this age of Kaumara basically refers to that age of 0 to 5. So in Sanskrit, the age of 0 to 5 is called as Kaumara. The age of 6 to 10 is called as Pauganda. And the age from 10 to 16 is called as Kaishora. We find these terms many times in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So 0 to 5 is called as Kaumara, 6 to 10 is called as Pauganda, and 10 to 16 onwards is called as Kaishora. So Prahlad Maharaj, who's a speaker here, he is not saying that bhakti or devotional service has to be started at the age of 15 or 20. He says devotional service should be started as soon as possible, ASAP, from the age of 0 to 5. And he says, Kaumaram acharet pragyo, someone who's pragya, which means someone who's intelligent, will start dharman bhagavatan iha, will start this process of devotion from a very young age, from the age of youth. Why? Because durlabham manusham janma, very important phrase. He says the human life is rare. It is rarely achieved. Not everyone is gifted with this unparalleled precious jewel of human life. So now we will just try to see what is Prahlad Maharaj actually trying to say here. And the first phrase he uses, he says, Durlabham Manusham Janma. He says human life is rare. Now, many times we have heard this in different classes, different DYS. Everywhere the speaker constantly says human life is rare, human life is rare. So now with the help of Padma Puran, one of the scriptures, we will try to understand mathematically how this human life is actually very rare. In the Padma Puran, there is a very beautiful classification of the different species that have been created by Brahma, who is the creator. Brahmaji, who has created so many species, the Padma Puran says there are 8.4 million species, which corresponds to 84 lakh in the Indian mathematics. 8.4 million in the American math or 84 lakh in the Indian math. And this classification is so beautifully given. Now, just for example, imagine there is a pyramid. And now this pyramid is sparsely populated at the top. We see the apex. The apex is sharp, which means it is sparsely populated, while the base or the bottom is densely populated. The base is long and is densely populated, while the apex is sparsely populated. Now we just take this example to understand the rarity of human life. The Padma Puran says, Jalaja nava lakshani sthavara laksha vimshati. Now classification has been made. What is the classification? Jalaja nava lakshani. Jalaja means those species that live in the water, which means the aquatics. How many types of aquatics are there? Nava lakshani. Nava means 9 and laksha means lakh. So there are 9 lakh types of aquatics. I'm not talking of the population. I'm not saying there are 9 lakh aquatics. There are 9 lakh types of aquatics, different types. And we see that for all the youth who have seen National Geographic or Animal Planet, we have a whale, you have a blue whale, you have a seahorse, you have a fish, you have a salmon. There are so many different types of aquatics. So that corresponds to 9 lakh. Jalaja nava lakshani. Then we go sthavara laksha vimshati. There are 20 lakh trees. So 9 lakh aquatics, 20 lakh trees. And we find this, that in India, you have the coconut tree, you have the neem tree, you have the palm tree. And when you come here to the US, especially to the California section, California has a particular type of tree called as rosewood tree. This is only found in the Californian desert, called as the rosewood tree. And I'm remembering that we all would have heard a disciple of Prabhupada by the name Brahmananda Swami. So once Brahmananda Swami came up to Prabhupada and he brought rosewood oil for Prabhupada's massage. And this rosewood oil is very expensive. Even in US terms, it is very expensive. So he brought this Californian oil, the rosewood oil, to Prabhupada so that Prabhupada can massage. And very proudly, Brahmananda Swami came and gave this to Prabhupada. And Prabhupada took it. And in one go, Prabhupada emptied the whole bottle in his palm and put it on his head and started massaging himself. And Brahmananda Swami was so perplexed. He said, Prabhupada, this is very expensive. Because in those days, they had paid almost $100 for a small bottle. We are talking 50 years back. $100 corresponds to about 8,000 rupees. So even now it is very expensive. Prabhupada poured the whole bottle in his hand and started massaging. Closing his eyes, Prabhupada was massaging the rosewood oil. So Brahmananda Swami was perplexed. He said, Prabhupada, this is very expensive. Prabhupada didn't speak anything. And after some time, Brahmananda Swami asked Prabhupada that, Prabhupada, how was it? Did you like it? And he expected that Prabhupada would glorify him, Prabhupada would praise him, Prabhupada would pat his back. He was expecting that praise. And we would be shocked what Prabhupada said. Prabhupada said, well, this is good, but the one in Calcutta, that is more better. The one that you get in India, that is more, it is more cooling to the head. So Brahmananda Swami was thinking that it is very difficult to understand Prabhupada. The whole world is going for rosewood oil, but Prabhupada is wanting a small bottle of oil from the streets of Calcutta. So like that, we find different trees around the world. So rosewood oil is very famous here in California. So Jalaja Nava Lakshani, there are 9 lakh aquatics. Sthavara Laksha Vimshati, there are 20 lakh trees. Then what is remaining? Animals, 30 lakh different types of animals. Please remember, we are not talking about the population. We are talking of the different types here. 30 lakh different types of animals. So what is the count now? 9 lakh plus 20 lakh plus 30 lakh, which means 59 lakh or 5.9 million. Now what is left? Birds, or 10 lakh different types of birds are there, which means 69 lakh. Now what is left? Insects, reptiles. In Hindi we say kide makode. So that corresponds to 11 lakh, which means 16, we were at 69 lakh plus 11 lakh, which means 80 lakh or 8 million. Now what is left? Finally, the human population. It corresponds to 4 lakh, which overall makes the math as 8.4 million or 84 lakh. Now you would have a question. We can understand 9 lakh types of aquatics, 20 lakh types of trees, understood, 30 lakh types of animals, but 4 lakh types of human beings? Wait a minute. Everywhere I see around, I see the same type of human beings. Everyone has 2 eyes, everyone has a nose, everyone has 2 hands, 2 legs, everyone has hair. Indian, American, European, Pakistani, West Indies, they all look alike. Only thing probably that separates is the color, but remaining features are pretty much the same. So 4 lakh types. Is Padma Puran making a mistake? Well, no. It is of paramount importance to understand that when scriptures give this understanding, they give this understanding keeping spirituality in center. So when we say 4 lakh different types of human being, there are 4 lakh different types of human being based on spiritual advancement. Now there is a spectrum. When we study math, all the youths who are studying math, we have a point called as 0. To the right side of 0, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the positive. And to the left side of that 0, we have all the negative. So that's considered a full spectrum. Similarly, in the spectrum, to one side of the spectrum, we have those who are atheistic. They are also human beings. But on one side of the spectrum, to the left side of the spectrum, we have those who are atheistic. While to the opposite end of the spectrum, we have those who are completely advanced, spiritually realized, Paramhamsa that we call. So in between atheistic, that is Nastic, and those who are completely self-realized, there are 4 lakh different types of human beings. Not the population, but 4 lakh different types of spiritually advanced human beings. So now we have all in all 84 lakh different types of species. Now, if we are good at math, we don't have to be a math genius, we don't have to be a math wizard, but if you're good in basic mathematics, we can do the mathematics that how many human beings are there? 4 lakh. What is the total creation? 84 lakh. Now just divide 4 lakh by 84 lakh into 100. How much do we get? 4.7%. You can pick up the calculator and do it. 4 lakh by 84 lakh into 100. That is 4.7%. Which means the probability of getting a human form of life is only 4.7%. Less than 5% is the probability. God doesn't play dice. Bhagwan dice nahi khelte. Like we play dice and we get 5 or we get 6. God doesn't play dice. It's not that by coincidence or by accident we got a human life. No. The probability Shastra describes is only 4.7%, less than 5%. And naturally, if the probability is so less, it only means that all of us sitting here have paid a very heavy price to get this human form of life. Getting an animal form, getting a bird form, getting aquatics, becoming trees is easier. But getting human form is very difficult. Just like all the youth will be very much familiar with this, when we have to apply to a college, there are different colleges across India. There are some colleges that are mediocre and some colleges that are really sky high, very difficult to get. And the famous example for that is IIT, Indian Institute of Technology. And even amidst that, the IIT Bombay is considered very high class. It is extremely difficult to get into IIT Bombay. But those who get into IIT Bombay, it is to be understood that they have paid a very heavy price. बहुत पढ़ाई लिखाई किया है उन्होंने. They have studied a lot. That's why they have got into IIT Bombay, which is very difficult to get. And in our movement, we have so many shining examples like that. We have His Grace Gauranga Prabhu. We have His Grace Radheshyam Prabhu, all from IIT Bombay, which is considered the pinnacle of even IIT. So the point I'm trying to make here is to get into a university like IIT is extremely difficult. But to get a human form of body, human form of life is more difficult than getting into IIT. The institute has higher acceptance rate, but getting this human form of body is only 4.7%. Extremely difficult to get. And this human form of body is what Prahlad Maharaj is saying as Durlabham Manusham Janma, very rarely obtained. But this human form has two facets. First, we have advanced consciousness, or in Sanskrit we call it as Chetana. We have advanced consciousness. What does consciousness mean? Well, consciousness basically means the ability to take pains and pleasure. That's it. The ability to take pains and pleasure is called as consciousness. Now, the trees have the lowest consciousness, while human beings have the highest consciousness. How do we understand that? Now, for everything that we are speaking, we are not just making a point, we are actually trying to have a scientific understanding to it. Because I know the youth will not take anything at face value. We are living in that generation where the youth want a proof, a practical proof for everything that we speak. So the trees have a lower consciousness. How do we understand it? Because when you have a lower consciousness, you can take more pain. And the trees we find for 500 to 600 to 700 years, they live at one place. They're standing at one place as it is. And now we know to stand at one place is very difficult. It is very painful. We are experiencing that pain because our consciousness is very high. But the trees have a low consciousness because of which they cannot experience this pain. So, first facet of a human being is advanced consciousness or Chetana. And the second is high intelligence, which is called as IQ, intelligence quotient. The human beings have a very high intelligence, and especially the modern day youth. They have such high IQ, such high intelligence. But there is something more to intelligence. Intelligence not only means knowing what is right and refraining from what is wrong. Intelligence also means accepting the right in our life and kicking out the wrong from our life. For example, we all know alcohol is bad. We all know alcohol affects the liver. But an intelligent person is someone who not only knows that alcohol is bad, but also accepts that in his life. He also refrains from alcohol. That is intelligence. On the flip side, we may have someone who knows everything. He knows alcohol is bad, but he goes outside without anyone's notice and drinks alcohol. That's not intelligence. That is foolishness. That is foolishness. But intelligence is knowing what is right and knowing what is wrong and accepting the right and refraining from the wrong. So getting this human form of life, as we discussed, the probability is only 4.7%. And this comes with these two facets, advanced consciousness and very high intelligence. But now we boil down to the most fundamental question. Why is human life given? And what is this generation we are living in, where technology is wireless, cooking is fireless, food is fatless, sweets are sugarless, politics is shameless, the youth are jobless, relationships are loveless, friendship is trustless, and life all in all is meaningless. Is practically seen. The youth, they study 25 years, they get into the best universities, but after that all the 25 years are, we are supposed to write that in one page called as the resume, and from one employer to another employer we beg for a job. Bhavati bhiksham dehi, please give me a job, please give me a job. 25 years we study just for that one job, and we ask that in one page of resume. So the youth is jobless, and life all in all is meaningless. And the reason life is meaningless is God is not there in the center. If God is kept in the center, then all these jigsaw puzzles start making sense. Many years back, I heard a very wonderful story which I thought of sharing. Long back, there was a king who was ruling a particular kingdom. And in that kingdom was a sage, was a sadhu. And now what do you think the sage will do? The sage or sadhu doesn't talk of things of this world. All he does is speaks about topics of the spiritual world. He speaks about God. He speaks about Krishna. So this sadhu would go up to the king and would time and again speak about spirituality. He would speak about the importance of life. He would give his katha. He would give his daily dose of Srimad Bhagavatam. But the king was a materialist. Just like we outside we go. And the moment you talk about spirituality, the friends, they don't want to talk to you. They keep a distance. You talk about Bollywood. You talk about Shah Rukh Khan. You talk about Hollywood. You talk about all the films. You talk about sports. You talk about Sachin Tendulkar, Roger Federer, Olympics. Then you are their best friend. The moment you talk about spirituality, you are sidelined. You will have no friends. And this king was no exception. The king wanted to live a luxurious life. Of course, he's the king. So he had a lot of ministers and a very opulent, very luxurious life. So he was not interested to hear the sadhu. The sadhu would say, but this king would look here and there and just not interested. And the sadhu understood. So the sadhu said, I have an offer for you. I will leave this kingdom once and for all. When the king heard this, his ears stood up. He became very happy. He said, what will it take for you to leave my kingdom? The sadhu said, I will leave your kingdom, but I have a condition. The king said, whatever condition you have, I am ready to fulfill it. But just go. Of course, he didn't say it, but in his heart, this is what he was thinking. Bas jao idhar se. Just leave from here. So the sadhu, he said that my condition is, you have to make the most foolish person in your kingdom as the chief minister. Go and find the most foolish person. सबसे जो बेवकूफ इंसान है उसको पकड़ के लेके आओ और उसको प्रधानमंत्री बनाओ. Make him the chief minister. If you make him the chief minister, I will leave your kingdom. So the king said, well, fair enough. That's a good deal. It should not be very difficult to find a foolish person. There are so many foolish people around. It's not difficult. And saying this, the sadhu left. Now the king called all his other ministers and said, go and find the most foolish person. So these so-called other ministers, they went outside, and the moment they went outside, immediately on one of the trees, on one of the branches, they saw a person sitting. Now, up until here, it was okay. He was sitting on the branch, but the most hilarious thing was he was sitting on the branch and cutting the branch. He was sitting on the branch and with an axe, he was cutting the branch. And these people who saw this, they said, he has to be the most foolish. Who sits on a branch and cuts the branch? They thought this guy has to be the most foolish. So they looked up to him and said, what are you doing? Don't you understand that you're sitting on the branch and cutting the branch? The branch is going to fall and you're going to hurt yourself. And this person said, oh no, nothing is going to happen. Don't disturb me. I'm cutting the branch. You go and do your work. I'm doing my work. But this minister said, use your intelligence. Don't you understand that it's only a matter of time, the branch will fall and you will get hurt? But this person who was cutting the branch, this went into deaf ears. He was not ready to hear. And sure enough, what do you think happened? He was cutting the branch and he fell to the ground. And when he fell to the ground, he came to this ministers and said, you have to be an astrologer. How could you predict that I will fall to the ground? And these ministers, they started laughing and chuckling and said, this guy is so foolish. Itna bada bewkoof hai. He doesn't understand that this, you don't have to be an astrologer to understand this. This is basic logic. This is common sense. And when he fell to the ground, they held his hand and took him to the king. And the king said, why have you brought him? So these ministers, they whispered in the ear that what had happened. And the king started laughing and giggling and chuckling. And they said, and the king announced that, oh, woodcutter, because he was sitting on the branch and cutting. He said, from today, you are the chief minister. And now this person was elated. He was happy because 5 minutes back, he was a normal woodcutter. And 5 minutes later, he is the chief minister of the king. So he was very happy. And the king gave him a gold baton. You see, baton is generally used in Olympics. Now is the time of Olympics. You know, everywhere people are discussing Olympics. So during the sprint, 100 meter, 200 meter, 400 meter relay, if we find when one person switches, he gives a baton to another person. So the king gave a baton to this minister. And this minister, chief minister, was so foolish that they would tell him to eat with the right hand, he would eat with the left hand. They would give a chronological order that do this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and he would do it topsy-turvy. He would do 3, 5, 7, 1, completely foolish. So the king was really furious. He would get really angry, but still he would not tell anything. Why? Because for the king, it was easy to bear this foolish person than to hear the pravachan of that sadhu. So the king somehow would manage. He would think to himself, this guy is okay in comparison to that sadhu who just speaks about spirituality. And as time went by, this minister was so foolish, but they would somehow tolerate. And finally, the time came when the king was in his departure bed. The king was about to die. And the king looked here and there. And he asked his other ministers, is everyone present? Has everyone come? And they looked around and said, oh, king, your chief minister is not present. And the king said, why don't you go and call him? So the chief minister came. And the chief minister looked at the king and said, oh, king, what happened? Where are you going? And the king said, I am departing this world. This is the path of death. So the chief minister said, can I come with you? Is that the reason why you called me? Can I also come with you? And the king said, no, this is that path where we come alone and we go alone. In Hindi, we say, kya leke aaye the, kya leke jayenge? What did you bring and what are you going to take? You brought nothing and you're not going to take anything. So the king said, no, I can't take you. This is the path where I go alone. And the chief minister said, now I understand. The reason you're not taking me is because you're going to take all your wealth, right? You're going to take all your dollars. You're going to take all your cents, all your rupees. And the king became furious. He said, don't you understand? This is that path where we go alone. We don't take a single cent. We don't take a single dollar. Don't you understand? This is the path where we came alone and we went alone. So I can't take anyone. This chief minister, when he heard, he said, now I understand. The reason you're not taking me, the reason you're not taking wealth is you want to take your wife, right? You want to take all your queens. You want to have some private time with them. That's the reason you're not taking me. The king got up and he became very angry and said, why don't you understand? This is that path. We cannot take anyone. We came alone and we went alone. And now the chief minister said, now I understand. You're not taking me. You're not taking your wealth. You're not taking your wife, but you're going to take all your inventory, right? You're going to take all your elephants, all your horses, all your swords. You want to take all of them with you. The king got up and he said, how can someone be so foolish? Why don't you understand? Death is that path where we cannot take anything, not even 1 cent. What to speak of so many people? At that time, this chief minister, he gave the gold baton to the king. And the king, he became so angry. He said, do you understand what you're doing? Because initially, when the chief minister was appointed, the king gave him an instruction that the day you find someone more foolish than you give the gold baton to them. So now when the king was departing this world, the chief minister gave the gold baton back to the king. So the king became angry and said, do you understand this is meant for the most foolish and you have the audacity to give it to me? And why do you think I'm the most foolish? So this minister, he said, my dear king, all your life you collected that wealth that you cannot take. All your life you collected those queens whom you cannot take. All your life you collected all the inventories on your palaces whom you cannot take. All your life you had so many ministers and chief ministers whom you cannot take. But that wealth of spirituality which you can take from one life to another, that you never accumulated. You never made any endeavor to collect that wealth which you can take. You very well knew that this wealth is going to stay here, right here. But that wealth which can be taken from one life to another, that spiritual wealth which can be amassed, O king, you never made any endeavor. And that is why I feel you are the most foolish. This king who was there, he got up and said, all the while I thought you're foolish, but now what you're speaking, this is Rajavidya Rajaguhyam. This is the most confidential knowledge. Who are you? And how is it that you're speaking so high-class philosophy? And this chief minister, he removed all of his decoration, his crown and his beard and his mustache and his robes. He removed everything. And he said, oh king, you remember that sadhu who was there? The king said, of course I remember that sadhu. I got you in my kingdom so that I can get rid of that sadhu. This chief minister said, I am the disciple of that sadhu. The sadhu all his life tried to preach to you about spirituality. That thing that he couldn't do when you were alive, I am trying to preach the same thing while you're departing. The king gave a condition to you to find the most foolish person. But when the sadhu, he left the kingdom, he came up to me. And on purpose, I was sitting on that branch and cutting the branch so that I can be considered as the most foolish. My dear king, that knowledge which my Guru Maharaj was trying to give you when you were alive, I am trying to give you the same knowledge while you're dying. Human life is meant for spiritual wealth collection. What is the moral that we learn from this? There are two morals. First, you can become the king. You can have wealth. We are not against it. Srila Prabhupada was never against earning wealth. We can earn wealth, but that is one side of the story. The most important moral is more important than collecting material wealth is collecting spiritual wealth, because spiritual wealth can be taken from one life to another. Now, what is the proof? Well, Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita gives the proof. Krishna says in the 2nd chapter, Neha vikramanasosti pratyavayo na vidyate swalpamapyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. Krishna clearly in the Bhagavad Gita, he says this wealth or spirituality can be carried from one life to another. And we find in this verse also, this is the reason Prahlad Maharaj is saying, Kaumaram achared pragyo. Someone who is intelligent should start this bhakti from youth, from young age, and not be foolish like that king who understood everything at the time of departure. Because durlabham manusham janma, human life is very rare. The probability is only 4.7%. And when we get this human form of life, Prahlad Maharaj also makes this point that he says that we are not this body, but we are the spirit soul. And now again, we have heard this time and again. Now, for all the devotees who have turned their videos on, I would request if others also can turn the videos on. We just try to do a small exercise here. Just take your finger Just take your index finger and now try to point it to your eyes. Try to point it to your eyes. Now try to point it to your nose. To your nose. Now try to point it to your ears. Now try to point it to your lips or your tongue. Now try to point it towards yourself. Right? Now try to point it towards your body. There is some confusion. Try to point it towards yourself. Try to point it towards your body. Till now, we were all going right. We pointed the eyes correctly. We pointed the nose correctly. We pointed the ears correctly. When it came to ourselves, this way, point towards the body, this way. Are we the body? Which, if we are pointing both towards this way, are we the body? Well, we are not the body. How do we know we are not the body? Well, because when a person departs this world, we say, Mr. X passed away. If we are the body, then even after the person has departed, the body is still there. The eyes are still there. The hands are still there. The legs are still there. So if we are the body, then even after departure, we are still there. But we say, Mr. X passed away. What is that What is that thing that has passed away? If we say we are the body, then body is still there. But there is something that has passed away. And that thing that has passed away is called as the soul. It is a soul that moves from one body to another, that transmigrates from one body to another, which means that the soul is distinct from the body. And this soul is spiritual in nature. This soul has its origin in Krishna. But this body is matter. It is dead matter. And something that is spiritual cannot be pointed by dead matter. This is why we are having a confusion pointing. Understand? We are able to point the nose because the nose is dead matter. We are able to point the eyes because the eyes is dead matter. We can point the ears because ears are dead matter. We can point the body because body is dead matter. But the soul is spiritual, and a material object cannot point to a spiritual object. This is why we are having confusion where to point. This is a simple logic. We can do this with our school friends also. This is a simple logic to prove that we are distinct from the body. We are not the body, but the spirit soul. Time and again, we hear this in Bhagavad Gita, but this is a practical way to understand it, that the soul is different. We are distinct from the body. And this is what Prahlad Maharaj says. We are not that body, but we are that spirit soul. And now this spirit soul has its origin in Krishna. Krishna says, Mamai Vansha Jiva Loke, Jiva Bhuta Sanatana, Manashashtani Indriyani, Prakriti Sthani Karshati. Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, he says that this soul has its origin in Krishna. So when we say that we are seeing, the eyes are seeing, it's not the eyes that is seeing, it is the soul that is seeing through the eyes. When we say the ears are hearing, it is not the ears that are hearing, it is the soul that is hearing through the ears. And likewise, it holds true for all other organs. So this soul has a few properties. Because it is spiritual, it has a few properties. First, it has its origin in Krishna. Second, it has interesting properties called as Sat, Chit, and Ananda. What is Sat? Sat means it is eternal. Chit means filled of knowledge. And Ananda means it is happiness. The soul doesn't have to go through birth, old age, disease, death. The soul cannot become moist. It cannot be withered away by air. The soul cannot be cut. The soul cannot be made into fragmented pieces. These are properties of the soul. Why? Because it is spiritual in nature. And now just see the interesting paradox. The soul has no manufacturing date and has no end date. It has no birth, it has no disease, it has no old age, no death. But this body, Sharira avidya jal, Jadendriya tahikal. No, it's not the time for prasadam, but I'm just giving an example. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he says, Sharira avidya jal. This body is a network of ignorance. And Jada Indriya, it is dead matter. So now the soul doesn't have to go through birth, old age, disease, and death, But this body, because it is dead matter, it has to go through birth, death, disease, and old age. And now because we are that soul, we just proved earlier how we are the soul. Now because we are that soul, we are trapped in the body that goes through these transformations. Our actual nature is to not go through this transformation of birth, old age, disease, and death. But because the body has to go through these transformations, that is why we are unhappy. When we become old, facelift, fair and lovely, hi handsome, we have all these advertisements to go to fade away this old age, to fade away disease. No one wants COVID-19. No one wants diabetes and cholesterol and blood pressure. We have all the fair and lovely advertisements and facelifts and face masks. Why? Because we are not happy with we being old. Our actual nature is to not get old. We are that soul that doesn't get old. But because the body is getting old, because we are trapped in that body, that is why we are unhappy. Make sense? Simple logic. So that is why we find Adi Shankaracharya, he very beautifully says, Angam galitam palitam mundam dashana vihina jata tundam vriddho yasi grihitva dandam tadapina munchati asha pindam. What does this mean? Adi Shankaracharya, he says, Angam galitam, the skin, oh, it starts to sag. That's when you have a face mask and all the fair and lovely products. Angam galitam palitam mundam, or this becomes like a moon, like the moon on Sharat Purnima, a full moon, like bright sunshine. It's completely effulgent. Palitam mundam dashana vihina jatah tundam. We start with 32. If it's wisdom, we have 33. But by the time we become old, there is one or two left dangling here, one or two here, one or two down. We can't even talk. We have to go to the dentist to have dentures. There is absolutely no teeth. And vriddho yasi grihitva dandam. All our life we walk with 2 legs, but during fag end, grihitva dandam, we now start walking with 3 legs. Tadapina munchati asha pindam. Adi Shankaracharya says, still the pot of desires is never satisfied. This is the predicament. All our life we do so many things, but even at the time of departure, the heart is still hankering for more. Dil mange more. Heart is still wanting for more. Even at the time of death, it is never satiated. It is never satisfied. So this is the predicament. And likewise, Adi Shankaracharya gives many more beautiful verses to illustrate this. He says, Balavasta Krida Sakta. When someone is youth, not youth, but very childhood, Kaumaravasta, Balavasta Krida Sakta. We play with toys. If it is boys, if 2 brothers, then fighting. I can say that because my older brother and myself, when we were young, we would have nice fist fights and the WWE and WWF. We have done all sorts of it. So those who are brothers, boys can relate to it. Boys means there will be fighting. And if it is girls, you have the Barbie dolls and so many others. So Balavasta Krida Sakta, when someone is small, they play with these things. Tarunavasta Taruni Asakta, when they turn 18, they ask parents for a motorbike. By the time they turn 25, they want someone behind on the motorbike, preferably a girl. Tarunavasta Taruni Asakta, you want someone to flaunt your motorbike. If you are in Mumbai, then you will find all these so-called youths driving the motorbike with girls behind in Marine Drive, next to our Chowpatty temple. So Tarunavasta Taruni Asakta, Vriddha Sakta, Chinta Sakta. But someone, when they become old, Chinta Sakta, they are plagued with Chinta, anxiety. Oh, my grandson said he will come at 4 o'clock. It's 4 or 5, he's still not here. Did he eat anything? It's 4:10. Did something happen to him? Is he with his friends? Did something happen? Did this happen? Did that happen? There is constantly anxiety. Vriddha Sakta, Chinta Sakta, Para Brahmana Kopina Sakta. All their life, Balavasta, they will play with toys. Taruna Sakta, they will hang around with the opposite gender. They will drive in the bike. And when they become old, they will flaunt and they will have desires. But the desire is never satisfied. till the last breath, they will never perform bhakti. Vriddha sakta, chinta sakta, para brahmana kopi na sakta. They will never perform bhakti. All their life, they will say, aage karenge, we'll do later. And we find this, that when you speak this to your friends, they will say, itni bhi kya jaldi hai, jeena jo hai barso. What is the hurry? We have a lot of time. We will do it when we are 50 and 60. आज करे सो अब करे सो परसों, इतनी भी क्या जल्दी है, जीना जो है बरसों. We will do bhakti आराम से 50, 60, 70 के होंगे तब करेंगे. But we find that this thing is never satisfied. Even when we turn 50 and 60 and 70, there are so many anxieties that come that we will never take up bhakti, Adi Shankaracharya says. And this is why Prahlad Maharaj is saying, Kaumaram, start now. When you're a youth, start bhakti now. Don't wait till the fag end of life. And this is what exactly Sripad Aindra Prabhu would say. Because when I joined, I could hear Sripad Aindra Prabhu's transcendental kirtan was going on. And Aindra Prabhu would make the same point. He would say, don't wait till the fag end of your life when bodily problems will make it impossible for you to remember Krishna. Time is now. Need is enormous. Jiva jago, Aindra Prabhu would say. So now is the time. You have the youth. Why the youth? Because the youth have the power of enthusiasm. The youth have the power of energy. The youth have the power of not going outside and working. Our parents don't ask us to go outside and work. They are earning the money. We don't have to think where our next prasadam will come from. Our mother is making all the chapatis. She's cooking. There is no anxiety of earning. There is no anxiety of prasadam. We have high energy, high enthusiasm, high intelligence. We can walk, we can talk, we can speak, we can see perfectly, we can read perfectly, we can hear perfectly. Our senses are at the pinnacle. So now is the time when the youth are endowed with so much power. Now is the time we start bhakti, and not at the fag end of life like that king. When you can't see, when you can't read, when you can't talk, you can't walk. Is that the age when we are going to start bhakti? I can actually say this point because earlier this year, I lost my grandfather who was about 90 years. And all his life he was devotional. He was not in ISKCON, but typical South Indian, nicely following. He would do his Sandhya Vandanam and he would chant all the verses. Very devotional, but not technically in ISKCON. But I saw that even during this fag end, he was so active that till the age of 75, he would catch a train and go to work. Till the age of 75, he was that active. But when he departed at the age of 90, the scene was so pathetic that urine in the bed, stool in the bed, not able to walk, not able to see, not able to hear, not able to talk, not able to eat anything. And I was thinking to myself, is that the age when we're going to start bhakti? No. Bhakti is meant for the youth. It is not meant for the old age. Only if you remember Krishna, perform bhakti during youth, can you remember Krishna, God, at the time of death. When we have exams, do we start studying one day before? Of course, if we are serious on failing the exam, then we will start one day before. But any good student doesn't start one day before. He starts well in advance. So if for a normal exam of this world, if we start well in advance, how well in advance we have to start for the ultimate spiritual test of remembering God at the time of death? If for normal exams of this world, we start early, how can we hope that we will remember God at the time of death? Not possible. So to remember God at that time of juncture, when body is not with us, we have to start it now during the time of youth, when the senses are perfect. We go full steam ahead with full intensity. As much as possible, we do bhakti now. Because once our ashram changes, once you have kids, once you start working, it all becomes extremely difficult. The amount of bhakti that we can do in youth cannot be done in any other phase of life. And this is why Prahlad Maharaj is saying, do it in youth, kaumaram. Anyone who's intelligent, pragya, will start it in youth. Because the bhakti that is done in childhood or in youth is like gold. It's invaluable. The bhakti that is done in middle age is like silver. The bhakti that is done between middle age and old age is like bronze, and the bhakti that is done in old age is like stone. And no one cares for a stone. So everyone is looking for that gold, and that gold means bhakti starting at Kaumar Avastha, at childhood phase. And time and again we find our teachers, our predecessor acharyas are making this point. Labdva sudurlabamidam bahusambhavante manushyam arthadam anityam apihadira turnam patet napatet anumrityu yavan nishreyasaya bhagavan khalu sarvatasyad. Canto 11, chapter 9, text 29, Srimad Bhagavatam. Shukadev Goswami, who is a speaker, he says, Turnam, don't delay, start right now, ASAP. Don't wait that I will do it tomorrow or day after. Someone came to Srila Prabhupada and he said to Srila Prabhupada that, well, bhakti, he was an Indian, so typical Indian. He went to Prabhupada and said, well, bhakti is meant for old people. It is not meant for young people, it is meant for old people. Bhakti बूढ़े लोग के लिए है, जवानी तो ऐश करने का समय है. It is meant for enjoyment. It is not meant for bhakti. Now this is the wrong thing you tell to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada is such a person who can whip you left and right with his arguments. He can just cut through you. So this is the wrong statement you go and tell Srila Prabhupada. So Prabhupada heard this and said, Bhakti is meant for the old. He said, yes, Bhakti is meant for the old. Javani to ash ke liye, it is meant for ash. It is meant for enjoyment. And Srila Prabhupada said, what is the definition of old? How do you define old? And he said, well, old, he started stammering. He said, well, old means you're about to die in some days. And Prabhupada said, well, basically old means the proximity to death. And he said, yes. And Prabhupada said, old means proximity to death, which means that person who is more closer to death is old. He said, yes. Prabhupada said, can you give me a guarantee that you will not die before me? And he said, well, I can't guarantee that way. So Prabhupada said, that means it's possible that you are more old than me. Externally, you may be only 25, but if it is possible that if you die earlier than me, it is possible you are more older. And that person said, well, yeah, that is true. It is possible I am more old. And Prabhupada started speaking to him, so much so that Prabhupada convinced him and he ended up becoming a disciple of Srila Prabhupada. So the point there Prabhupada makes is old age doesn't mean white hair. It doesn't mean a complete shining moon, a cricket field. It doesn't mean dentures. That is one definition of old age. But old age also means proximity to death. And we find this during the age of like COVID-19. There are so many who have left their body at 25 and 30 and 35. So we have practically seen the last 1.5 years that human life, it is that bubble that can burst anytime. We can never take it for granted. And Bhagavatam time and again makes the same point. Turnam patet napatet anumrityu yavan. This bubble of human life can burst anytime. So use all your power of youth, the power of enthusiasm, the power of energy, the power of perfect senses in Krsna Bhakti. Don't wait till that fag end of life. And we find because Bhakti is not performed by the youth, that is why the present day youth is unsatisfied. Why do we find so many cases of suicides in the present day youth? Small cases. The other day I was saying that it is so trivial. One 18-year-old in Guwahati, India, he got into IIT. He got into IIT Guwahati. But he wanted to get into IIT Bombay because IIT Bombay is so high class. Because he didn't get into IIT Bombay, he committed suicide. He was found hanging in his hostel room. He already had an admission in IIT Guwahati, but because he didn't get into IIT Bombay, he committed suicide. This is the youth. This is the generation that we are living in, such a rat race that we feel defeated. If my friend is doing, and if I can't do, that means I'm a failure. Well, no, we are not. Everyone is going their own race. We are not here to compete with anyone. He may get into IIT, I may get into some other college, doesn't matter. Human life is not just meant for material achievement. The perfection of human life is when we start doing bhakti. Anyone who is doing bhakti is intelligent in the eyes of Krishna. Anyone who doesn't do bhakti, doesn't matter if he's Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos or anyone very prominent. If they are not doing bhakti in the pages of Bhagavatam, they are not considered intelligent. This is the fundamental definition of intelligence in scripture. Anyone who does bhakti is intelligent. We may be fifth fail, पांचवी fail रह सकते हैं, लेकिन अगर भक्ति कर रहे हैं तो भगवान के दृष्टिकोण से हम बुद्धिमान है. We are बुद्धिशाली, we are intelligent. But we may be Elon Musk, we may be going to space, we may have Tesla and everything. But if there is no practice of bhakti, no practice of spirituality, the mind will never be happy. And I will give you an example for this. Consider there is a drama performance going on. And there is a man in that drama acting like a female. He's acting like a lady. Now this man is acting like a lady throughout the 30-minute drama and everyone is clapping. Everyone is clapping for his wonderful performance. It's a thumbs up. Everyone is loving the performance. And now the drama is done. And even after the drama, now this person is, if he is acting like a female, he is uncomfortable. He is not happy. Why? Because it is not his genuine nature to be a female. He's actually a male, but he's acting to be a female. And that is the reason he's unhappy. Similarly, we are spiritual beings, but acting like bodies. And this is the reason we are unhappy. Just like that male, even after the drama, is acting like a female. And that is the reason he's unhappy. Similarly, we are spiritual beings, but acting like bodies. And this is the reason of our unhappiness. This is why we are unsatisfied. We are not human beings with a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. Let that sink in. We are not people of this world. We are not just normal human beings. We are spiritual beings, but going through a human phase. And this human form of life is given so that we break this shackle of birth and death once and for all. We are not there in this world to make it big place. We are not here to become someone very great in the material sense. This human life is given only with one purpose, to break this shackle of birth and death, period. That is the only purpose of human life. That is the only reason why Krishna gives this human life. To give another example, if there is a cage and inside the cage, there is a bird that is sitting. And this bird has been in the cage for many years and many decades. And finally, the owner opens the door of the cage. Now, what is an intelligent bird supposed to do? An intelligent bird is someone who will fly out of the cage, because for many years, the bird was trapped in that cage. And finally, the cage has been opened. The door of that cage has been opened. So an intelligent bird is someone who will, without delay, fly out of that cage. For all the lifetimes that we have taken in the bird species, animal species, tree species, insects, reptiles, till all that time, we never had the opportunity to break this repeated cycle of birth and death. But this human form of life means opening this cage. This cage has now been opened for all of us. And if we perform bhakti, then we can fly out of this cycle of repeated birth and death once and for all. We have all played this snakes and ladder game. When we were young, we have all played this snakes and ladder game. And in the snakes and ladder, we find we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It goes up to 98, 99, 100. 99 is the human form of life. 100 is Golok Vrindavan, is the spiritual world. We are right now at 99. We have to just put one step forward to go back to Krishna. But if we don't do bhakti, then that snake will get us down. And it will get us down to the animal species. That is why it is shown as a snake. To show to all of us, if you don't perform bhakti, the next life is that of an animal species. So youth is that time where we invest as much energy, as much time, as much enthusiasm, as much as possible to perform this bhakti. Because now the cage has been opened for all of us to fly once and for all back to the spiritual world from where we don't return. How do we know we will not return? Because Krishna says, Yadgatvan anivartante tadhamam paramam mama. Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita 15th chapter, he says, anyone who comes back to me, will never again come back to this world where it is filled with unhappiness and everything is so temporary and impermanent. So to summarize our discussion, the fundamental point that we mentioned is, first, we made this point as to how rare human life is. And we discussed from the Padma Purana and said the probability of getting a human form is only 4.79%. Then we spoke about the two facets of human life, that is high IQ and advanced consciousness. Then we spoke about the story of the king, and we discussed as to how more important than collecting material wealth is collecting spiritual wealth. Then we fundamentally proved through our exercise as to how we are not the body, but we are the spirit soul. Then we made a few points of the spirit soul, how the spirit soul has the origin in the Supreme Lord, Shri Krishna. And then we discussed about how the bubble of human life can break by discussing a few verses. We then gave the example of the drama as to how the person, when he acts as female, is uncomfortable. Similarly, we are spiritual beings, but we are now acting as bodies, and this is why we are not happy. And finally, we made this point of the bird having the opportunity to fly out of this cage. This only means that human life is that phase where we can now fly off the cage of repeated birth and death cycle. And all this can be achieved only in the youth, because youth is the time when there are no responsibilities. No one expects us to go out and earn. No one expects us to cook. No one expects us to do any of these things. All we are asked is just to study and chant and hear. So the maximum we do, the maximum we can progress, and the maximum bhakti that is done right now at this phase, we will be able to remember the Supreme Lord at the time of departure. Because the Shastras very beautifully say that, you see, we know how a film works. Ideally, a devotee is not supposed to engage in watching movies because that is not conducive to bhakti. But we know how a movie transitions. There is one scene, next scene, next scene, next scene, next scene, and then finally you have the climax. Similarly, our Shastras say at the time of departure, we will be able to see a complete movie of our whole life. All the 60, 70 years that we have lived, in one flash, we will be seeing a complete movie. Now, if the whole life you have not performed bhakti, then at the time of death, even when you see that flash of movie, you will not see anything related to Krishna. And this movie is such, it can stop anywhere. It can buffer anywhere. Just like you see YouTube videos and it starts buffering. It starts loading. Similarly, at the time of departure, when we see the whole picture of our life, if all our life we have just enjoyed and not performed bhakti, this film can stop anywhere. And Krishna says, whatever you remember at the time of death, you will attain that. But now, if the whole life you are performing bhakti, we have no fear. Wherever the film stops, we have no fear because all our life we have performed bhakti. And wherever that movie stops, we are still remembering Krishna. This is the aim of human life. So youth is that time when we perform maximum bhakti as much as possible so that we have hope of remembering the Supreme Lord at the time of departure. Otherwise, it's not easy. Just like as we mentioned, we don't study for exam one day prior. We study from a few days earlier, a few weeks, or a few months earlier. Similarly, for this spiritual exam, we study for years and decades. We start earlier, and then we can hope to remember the Supreme Lord. Finally, to wrap up, His Grace Vaisheshika Prabhu from the ISKCON of Silicon Valley, he very beautifully he says, page by page, become a sage to exit this cage of human life. Which means page by page, study the scriptures like Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam, become a sage, exit this cage of material life, and once and for all, go back home, back to Krishna. This is why human life is given. And this is the aim of being a youth. All this cannot be achieved when one turns 50 and 60 and 70. And if there are devotees in our call who are 60 and 70 and 80, they can actually vouch for it. They will agree to this fact that the bhakti that can be done in a young age Once we become old, the body does not cooperate with us. There are so many bodily problems that it becomes difficult. But in youth, no bodily problems, no responsibilities, no one expects anything of us. So that is the time we take advantage, complete advantage, and march our way back to Krishna. And in our way of marching, we also try to inspire our friends, our relatives, our family members, etc. So having said this, I very humbly stop here. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much for being on the call. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, there are a few questions. If you may allow, may I speak?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Prabhuji, this is the first question. How to face criticism of non-devotees when we are new to spiritual journey?
So if I understand the question right, how do we face criticism from non-devotees? When we are just starting bhakti, how do we face criticism from non-devotees? Is that right?
Yes, Prabhuji.
So this point has been noted, and we are not the first individuals to be criticized. Every devotee, when he starts his journey, the first criticism doesn't come from outsiders, but it comes from your own family members. It is always seen. If the parents are not devotees, and if the child takes up to bhakti, the parents will say, hey, well, all your friends are going to movies, all of them are going to parties, why don't you do that? Why do such an exception? But if the parents are devotees and the child is also devotees, then it will come from the relatives. It is experiential. We all have experiences. The first criticism is not from outsiders, but it is from your own family members. And this is parampara. Why? Because Prahlad Maharaj also got the first criticism from his own father, Hiranyakashipu. He didn't get it from others. He got it from his own father. So when Prahlad Maharaj was criticized by his own father, what did Prahlad Maharaj do? He tolerated. He didn't speak anything. Devotee means he tolerates. As Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Trunadapi Sunichena, Taroreva Sahishtuna Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadahari. In the third verse of Siksashtakam prayers, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says that devotee means he is tolerant. He just waits. Srila Radhanath Swami Maharaj makes a very beautiful statement. Maharaj says that 99% of our preaching is through our character. Sometimes we open our mouth, which means 99% of whomever we meet, they will get inspired by us, not through our speaking, not through the quoting verses, but by our character, how we lead our lives. Just by seeing us, they will get inspired. So now if we are getting criticism from non-devotees, we just tolerate. But we don't stop our bhakti. We don't compromise for them because we know what we are doing is right. Because we are not doing from our mind. They are following their life from their mind. They are following their mind, and the mind can cheat us. But the scriptures like Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam, which is told by the Supreme Lord, the Lord doesn't cheat. So we follow in our path as it is with no compromise. And that day is not far when those who are criticizing will also become friendly to us. Prahlad Maharaj never spoke anything against his father. We've seen the 7th canto. We took the example of Prahlad Maharaj today. In all the 14 chapters of the 7th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, nowhere does Prahlad Maharaj say, hey, I am doing so much bhakti. Why am I suffering? Why is my father throwing from a hill? Why is he doing this to me? Why is bad thing happening to good people? The common question. I am such a good man. Why is bad thing happening to me? Prahlad Maharaj doesn't say anything. He just accepts everything as the will of the Lord. So when we start bhakti, these criticisms help us become more tolerant, because till the time we are not tolerant in bhakti, we don't make any advancement. So it is Krishna's blessing that Krishna is sending such people in our lives so that they can speak such words which can make us tolerant. Otherwise, if everyone is glorifying us, everyone is buttering us, how will we become tolerant? There is so much pride and arrogance inside. There has to be someone who makes us straight. So Krishna uses our own family members, like he used Hiranyakashipu. He used his own family members to teach all of us a lesson. So when our non-devotee family or relatives or friends in school, when they criticize us, we tolerate. But we don't stop our bhakti. We don't stop our chanting. We don't stop our hearing. That day is not far when we are strict in our bhakti. They will also start following us, seeing our character. And I'll give an example for this. When I joined my master's here in the US, in New Jersey, and I remember, because it's the US, the first or the second day, there was the orientation. And in the orientation, because most individuals from India, they come here to the US and parents are back in India. So now they are like a free bird. No one is there to tell him anything. So Joseph India mein nahi karne hua, they come here to the US and start doing. So you can imagine what I'm talking about. And right in the second day, those who had never touched a drop of alcohol, they started drinking. And this was like a big get together, like about 1,000 individuals had gathered, because it's the orientation. And they turned up to me and they said, well, aren't you going to drink? I said, well, no. Of course, I didn't tell them the philosophy, but I just said no. And then they said, why? I said, well, I just don't drink. I have never had a sip of alcohol. I don't drink. And I remember one of those individuals, he told me, if you stay with us, that day is not far. You will also start drinking. You will also start boozing with us. And I said, well, time will only say. Time will say what holds in the future. And they were convinced that if I stay with them, I will start drinking. But 2 years went by and I was the same. I did not touch a drop of alcohol. And on the last day of my master's, I remembered this. I went back to the same person and I said, remember 2 years back during orientation, you told me that if I stay with you longer, I will also start drinking alcohol. And he said, Salam hai, I salute you. This is what he said. He said, Salam hai, I salute you. Because I have never seen a 25-year-old be so resolute when his parents are away, being so resolute to not drink alcohol. And after that, he became so conducive that he's still now in touch with me. He's not devotional, but he's in touch with me. So the heart has slowly now transformed. I didn't speak any philosophy, but just I practiced whatever we have been taught by Srila Prabhupada. So the point I'm saying is we will get criticism. Every single one of us will get criticism, but don't stop our practice of bhakti. The more you perform bhakti, the more they see that you're serious on your path, they will start respecting you. The criticism will be there for 1, 2, 3 weeks. That's it. But if you're serious, they will start respecting you. And that day is not far when their heart will slowly start changing and they will start listening to you. And that day is also not far when they will become devotees. So again, to reiterate the point, as Srila Radhanath Maharaj says, preaching is a 24-hour activity. Sometimes we have to open our mouth, which means we always preach through our character. Very sometimes, very rarely, seldom do we have to speak verses and convince others. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Bol. Next question, Prabhuji. There are so many books and lectures of Srila Prabhupada. Is there any specific order to go through?
Yeah, so we find that Srila Prabhupada spoke for more than 10,000 hours during the last 10 years that Srila Prabhupada performed his pastimes in this mortal world. And of course, Prabhupada wrote so many books also. But there is a beautiful order actually I had seen long back that His Grace Radheshyam Prabhu had compiled. We may, I think, still find if we get in touch with the NVCC devotees. There is a beautiful order that Radheshyam Prabhu himself has compiled, the order in which we have to read the books of Prabhupada, and when do we have to touch the Bhagavatam, when do we have to touch the Chaitanya Charitamrita, etc. But when it comes to hearing the lectures of Prabhupada, we can just pick up any lecture of Prabhupada and start hearing. Whether it's the morning walk, whether it's a room conversation, whether it is a Srimad Bhagavatam class, whether it's the Chaitanya Charitamrita class, whether Prabhupada is speaking to a professor or whether Prabhupada is addressing in a festival, in a Pandal program, we can just pick any lecture of Srila Prabhupada and start hearing, because the lectures of Srila Prabhupada are like a rasgulla. You eat the rasgulla from the top, it is sweet. You eat the rasgulla from the down, it is sweet. You eat it from the side, it is sweet. Similarly, the lectures of Prabhupada, you start the Bhagavatam lectures, it is sweet. You start the Chaitanya Charitamrita lectures, it is sweet. Home lectures, it is sweet. Arrival address, it is sweet. Pandal programs, it is sweet. So lectures of Prabhupada, we start any which ways possible, whatever we have. When it comes to the reading of the books of Prabhupada, we first start with the small books like Science of Self-Realization and so many other books that Srila Prabhupada has written. We start with the smaller editions of the books. We then slowly transition to Bhagavad Gita. Once Bhagavad Gita is done, then we transition to Srimad Bhagavatam. Once Bhagavatam is done, that's when we go to Chaitanya Charitamrita. Because Prabhupada would always say Chaitanya Charitamrita is the postdoc study. It's the PhD study. So till the time we don't understand Krishna Leela, Bhagavatam, we will never understand Chaitanya Leela. Because Krishna Leela and Chaitanya Leela are like the ocean and the shore. Just like the ocean comes and touches the shore, when it touches the shore, it also takes some sand particles back along with the ocean. Similarly, Krishna Leela is like that ocean, and the sand particles are like the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Leela. It goes back and forth. It's the same personalities who appeared in Dwapar, appearing back in this age of Kali. So first we read the small books of Prabhupada. All the small books that Prabhupada has written, including the Back to Godhead magazines. All the Back to Godhead magazines that Prabhupada wrote from 1944 or 1945, we still find them in ISKCON Desiratory. We read all of the Back to Godhead magazines. We read all of the small books that Prabhupada has written. Then we go to Bhagavad Gita. Then we go to Bhagavatam. Then finally we go to Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Once all of this is done, then we go on to the books of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and so many others. And when this is going on, at the same time, we read the books, we hear the lectures of Prabhupada. Like, for example, if we are reading a particular verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam, for example, Canto 7, Chapter 7, Text 18, which describes the appearance of Nrsimhadev. We read that section, we read the purport, and now we go to the lecture. We search the lecture where Prabhupada has spoken on this verse. We hear that lecture. Now what has happened is we have read the book of Prabhupada, we have read the purport, and we have also heard the lecture of Prabhupada. So our understanding on that verse deepens. Now we go on to the next verse. Read the purport and look whether Prabhupada has given a lecture on that. For most of the verses, we will find Prabhupada has given his short lectures. So that's how we study Shastra. We read translation, word to word, purport. We hear also the lecture of Prabhupada to that particular verse. Then we transition. Like that, we finish all the books of Srila Prabhupada. So we start from the small books. We go to Bhagavad Gita. We go to Srimad Bhagavatam. Go to the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. And while we are doing this, parallelly, we also hear the lectures of Prabhupada. And then we slowly go on to the works or the books of our predecessor acharyas like Sripad Sanatan Goswami and Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti, etc.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Next question. We are always told that we are not this body but spirit soul, but we forget it and act as usual. So how to realize and remember it always and act according to our constitutional position? Because you said that intelligent is one who accepts the truth and practically implements in life. Please guide.
Hare Krishna. So, of course, I'm also in the same boat. I still not realized it. I still consider myself as this body. But from what I've heard from my superiors, that we are all in the practicing stage. And right now, we don't know what our constitutional position is. We don't know what our relationship with Krishna is. So only when we know what our relationship with Krishna is, that's when we can act on it. But right now, we do not have much idea on it. But how to remind ourselves that we are not this body, we are spirit soul, and how do we understand that we always are there with Krishna? How do we never forget this philosophy? Like Prabhupada would say, always remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. It is easier to say, but how many of us actually remember Krishna all the time? Handful. So in order to always keep that philosophy in our mind, in order to always remember Krishna, in order to remember that we belong to Krishna and we are not this body, we should always associate with those who are self-realized in this. Without sadhu sangha, we can never understand this. And we find this is one of the crest jewel instructions that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave to Sripad Sanatan Goswami. In the Madhya Lila chapter 20 of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, which is a Sanatan Siksha, this most famous verse arises where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Sadhu Sangha Sarva Shastra Kahe, Lava Matra Sadhu Sangha Sarva Siddhi Hoy. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu tells Sripad Sanatan Goswami that even a moment's association with Sadhu helps us understand the complete import of the Shastra. And one of the import of the Shastra is we are not this body, but we are the spirit soul. So we have to always try to associate with very high-class devotees. How do we find high-class devotees? Srila Govinda Maharaj would say that you have to cry for it. If you cry for it, you will get high-class devotee association. Bilva Mangala Thakur cried, he got Krishna. Prahlad Maharaj cried, he got Krishna. Dhruva cried, he got Krishna. Rukmini cried, she got Krishna. Gopis cried, they got Krishna. The friends of Krishna cried, they got Krishna. The Dvija Patnis, the wife of the Brahmanas, they cried, they got Krishna. It is seen in the Bhagavatam that those who cry get Krishna and his devotees. So Srila Govinda Maharaj would say, till the time you don't cry and you don't pray to Krishna, you will never get devotee association. And when I say devotee association, it is not any devotee association. We are talking about high-class devotee association. Those who have realized this fact that they are not this body, but the spirit soul. So we have to always look, we have to always be thirsty for this kind of devotee association. So Govinda Maharaj would always say, if you seek, you shall find. This was the favorite statement of Srila Govinda Maharaj. He would say, if you seek, you shall find. Which means if you go about and search and start hearing and beg and pray to Krishna, devotees will start walking in your life who will inspire you in your life, so much so that you will understand that you are not this body, but the spirit soul. But on our own endeavor, we will never understand. Sripad Aindra would always say, don't be an independent angel. Don't think that in bhakti we can do everything independently. Doesn't work. We all need everyone's help. We have to all hold each other's hands, and holding hands, we can go back to Krishna. Individually, it is not possible. Like Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj would always say that whenever you criticize a devotee, you are slamming the door of Golok Vrindavan on your face. Because without the devotee's mercy, you cannot go back to Krishna. And now if you criticize that devotee, you are slamming the door of Golok Vrindavan on your face. Krishna will never accept you. So you would always say, never criticize Vaishnavas. Always pray to Krishna and beg and cry for devotee association. And only then, as Guru Govinda Maharaj and Prabhupada say, you will get high-class devotee association in your life who will help you realize, who will make you intelligent enough, who will make you pragya, intelligent enough to understand you are not this body, but the spirit soul. So we beg and pray and cry for very high-class devotee association. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Next question. Please guide what will be the role of parents whose children have just started bhakti, especially girls.
What is the role of parents?
Whose children have just started bhakti, especially girls.
Well, I may not be the right person to answer this because I am still a bachelor. I'm still 25. And in my house, it's just my brother and myself. So we have never seen girls who are young around. So I really would have no context on this, and I would not be able to shed much light on this as to how girls can be trained. My humble suggestion here would be to approach Vaishnavas who are senior on this path of bhakti and who have had girls, and those girls who are still practicing bhakti. My humble suggestion would be to go up to them and ask, because I personally have no experience. I'm not even married. So to speak on this subject matter would be beyond my understanding. It would just be like a parrot trying to speak something. So my humble 2 cents here would be to go to a couple who have had girls and who have trained them on this path of Krishna Bhakti. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Next question. How can we know whether our prayers are being heard or not?
How can we know whether our prayers Krishna is hearing or not? When generally, when we pray to Krishna, our prayer should never be material prayers. Shastra always teaches us that when we approach Krishna, it should be never for material gain. The Brajavasis never approached Krishna for anything material. Rukmini never approached Krishna for anything material. Whenever we approach the Supreme Lord, it should always ideally be for anything spiritual. And this is the fundamental theme of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the nectar of devotion. Anya abhilashitam shunyam. Shunyam means zero. That mark that we get in our exams, zero. The shunya abhilashitam, anya abhilashitam shunyam. Desires should be zero. That's when bhakti is actually started. And that is the actual prayer that we pray to the Supreme Lord. But how do we understand whether our prayers are getting answered? Well, we can understand this by the amount of advancement that we are making on this path of bhakti. Every Ekadashi to Ekadashi, we should do a self-check. 15 days ago, I was chanting X amount of rounds. I was reading this. After 15 days, am I still doing the same thing? Or have I made some improvements? Have I made some adjustments? Prayers means we beg the Lord, we pray for advancement, not for material benefits, because Prahlad Maharaj says that material benefits will anyway come to us. Shita Ushna Sukha Dukhatha. No one prays for summer, but summer comes. If you're in Vrindavan, the summer is like 44 and 45 and sometimes even touches 50, extremely hot. We don't pray for the summer, but it comes. Similarly, if you're there here in the US, minus 15 and minus 20 and sometimes minus 25, we don't ask for winter, we don't ask for snow, but it naturally comes. Similarly, these material shifts, they're like the waves and they will naturally come to us. But spirituality is the thing that we are supposed to pray. And our prayer, only prayer to the Supreme Lord should be, my dear Lord, how can I make advancement? How can I have more devotee association? How can I start chanting my rounds with more attention? How can I start chanting in the morning in Brahma Muhurta? How can I read more books of Prabhupada? How can I start speaking about Krishna to more of my friends and more of my relatives? This is the prayer that we ask. So along with the prayer, every 15 days or every month, we also do introspection. We do a self-check and see whether I have had devotee association, whether I have started hearing, whether I have started chanting more, whether I have started chanting in the morning. When we start ticking these boxes, we understand that Krishna is slowly hearing to our prayers. The prayers have to be serious. If we just occasionally pray, if we just pray once in a blue moon to Krishna, and all the remaining time we are praying for dhanam dehi, vittam dehi. In the morning, we say na dhanam, na janam, na sundarim. But in the heart, we want more dhanam, more janam, more sundarim. Similarly, in the morning, we say, Seva adhikara diye koro nijadasi. But in the heart, Seva adhikara diye koro nijadasi. The heart is hankering for an adhikar. The heart is hankering for more dhanam, more janam, more vittam. But this is not the prayer that we are supposed to have. These are material gains and material benefits. And Shastra clearly describes this is not something that is expected that we ask Krishna. So we ask, first of all, what are we supposed to ask? We ask for spiritual advancement, for high-class devotee association, for chanting more japa, having more devotee association, reading more books, chanting in the morning, etc. And when these prayers, these spiritual prayers get answered, we will see a change in our lives. We will start seeing that more and more sadhus are walking in my life. I am getting naturally inspired to get up in the morning and chant. Prabhupada would always say that if someone is serious on this path of bhakti, then they will get up in the morning. The first hallmark of a devotee who is serious on the path of bhakti is he will not sleep during Brahma Muhurta. Brahma Muhurta means 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. Anyone who is serious on making advancement cannot afford to sleep during Brahma Muhurta. Why? Because every round chanted during Brahma Muhurta is equivalent to 1,000 rounds chanted any other time of the day. So if you chant 16 rounds during Brahma Muhurta, you get the benefit of chanting 16,000 rounds. So now only a person who is less intelligent will sleep till about 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock and then start chanting. A person who's pragya, a person who's intelligent, will wake up in the morning and chant as much as possible. So these are the prayers that we ask the Supreme Lord Shri Krishna. And when we see the implementation of these prayers in our life, that's when we understand that Krishna has started hearing to our prayers and Krishna started reciprocating to our prayers. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, if you allow, can we take last two questions?
Yes, sure, Prabhu.
Can you please tell Prabhuji how important is material education when practicing spirituality?
Hare Krishna. Very wonderful question. When I was small, I had a lot of association of Sripad Bhakti Swarup Damodar Swami Maharaj, who was the guru of my parents, and my brother and I, we had a lot of association of Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj when we were in our youth. And Maharaj was the first Siksha Guru. When Maharaj met Srila Prabhupada first time, it was in Los Angeles. And he was about 35 or 36. And he was doing his PhD in University of Illinois, California, University of Irvine, California. And University of Irvine, California is ranked so high, even till this date, it is ranked in the top 10 universities in the world. So Maharaj was doing his PhD there. And the moment he met Prabhupada, he lost all interest for his studies. He came and told Prabhupada that, Prabhupada, if spirituality is the ultimate aim, why should I study? I will better give up my education and I will be with you just speaking and preaching and practicing this message of Krishna consciousness. But when Prabhupada heard this, Prabhupada said no. He said, you have to study. Why? Because Prabhupada said, we are living in that age where till the time you are not educated, people will not hear you. You may be speaking from the Bhagavatam. You may speak from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And these literatures are absolutely perfect. But people of this world are such, till the time they don't see B.Tech, IIT, Masters, PhD, till the time the materialists don't see such education, they will not respect you. So in order to gain their respect, we study. Otherwise, material education is not required. But in order to speak about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Prithivite ache jodi nagaro adi gram sarvatra prachar hoibe mora naam, that my name will be spread in every town and village. But to spread his name in every town and village, the first thing that people see is how qualified are you? How much education have you done? Because otherwise people should not feel that because I couldn't do education, I have resorted to spirituality. Padhai nahi hua, uske liye bhakti mein aa gaya. People should never say this. As followers of Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada was very qualified. Sripad Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj was a PhD, scientist disciple of Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada, if you see many of the lectures, Srila Prabhupada would always say, my scientist disciple. Where is my Swarup Damodar? My scientist. So Prabhupada always loved education very much. So as the followers of Prabhupada, we should never neglect material education. They may not be important. That's the second point. But in order to preach Krishna consciousness, we have to study, because people of this world, they first, what they see is resume. How qualified are you? If you are a master's, if you are a PhD, or you're working in a very big company, that's when they start giving you respect. So in order to gain their respect, we study. But otherwise, there is no required. So Prabhupada would make this point time and again. For our preaching, we study. Why is it that devotees had so much respect and love for Sripad Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj? Because he is a PhD. His Grace Gauranga Prabhu is an IIT. His Grace Adesham Prabhu is an IIT. And there are so many other examples such way. My Siksha Guru, His Grace Mukund Madhav Prabhu from ISKCON Juhu, who is the Vice President of ISKCON Juhu Mumbai Temple, is a double master's with a PhD. So time and again we find that in our movement, we do not encourage those who are not materially qualified. In fact, 99% of all the brahmacharis and grahasthas are well educated. So it is not that to run away from education, we are coming in bhakti. No, we are able to do material education also, but we prioritize spiritual education, because it is this spiritual education that is going to help us cross over this ocean of birth and death. But now people of this world will not understand so much philosophy. They only understand material education. So in order to gain their attention and their respect, we go to a good university and study so that we get their respect. Otherwise, material education is not very important, but just gain their respect. It is a strategic move to gain their love and appreciation and respect. We go to a university and study. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. This is the last question. How can I realize every time that I'm not this body, I'm the soul?
I think this question was very similar to what we answered earlier as to how I can remember or how I can realize that I'm not this body but the spirit soul. And we again come back to the same point that I mentioned earlier, that we may read the books of Prabhupada, we may hear the lectures of Srila Prabhupada, but till the time we don't have very high class association, physical association, till the time we may not realize these high truths. Yahara Bhagavata Pada Vaishnavera Sthane Ekanta Ashray Koro Chaitanya Charane. Till the time we don't go to a devotee who has taken akhanda shelter of Chaitanya Charitamrita on Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and don't hear from him the esoteric truths of Srimad Bhagavatam and other scriptures, till that time we may not understand. I give you an example. If there is a kitchen and this kitchen has all the ingredients, it has tomatoes, it has capsicum, it has potatoes, it has all the ingredients, and there is knife and the cutting board. Now, if I walk into the kitchen, I am an amateur cook. I don't know anything to cook. In my master's, the best thing I could cook was probably a khichdi. I don't know anything other than that. So if I walk into a kitchen with these ingredients, I can cook to the best of my ability. But now if an expert cook walks inside, like Vikas Khanna or Sanjay Kapoor, if these expert cooks walk into that kitchen, from that same ingredients, they can make a 5-star recipe. So the recipe is always there, like the recipe of Srimad Bhagavatam. But if I study Srimad Bhagavatam, I can understand to the best of my ability. But if I go to a very high class devotee who has realized it, I can also understand his realization. I can understand the realization of Prabhupada. I can also understand the realization that he has in his heart. And that is how we will be able to understand we are not this body, but the spirit soul. So reading the books of Prabhupada, hearing the lectures of Prabhupada is one thing, but also having the association of very high class devotees is equally very important. As much as possible, physical association, because the amount of spiritual advancement we can gain in the physical proximity of our Sri Guru or our Siksha Guru or any high class advanced Vaishnava cannot be mapped. We cannot have that same amount of advancement just by sitting at one corner of this world. So we try to go to high class devotees and try to associate with them in order to understand these very esoteric truths that we are not this body, but we are the spirit soul. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, if you permit, can we ask just one last important question, which is posted on the chat recently?
Sure, Prabhuji.
How can a student balance studies and sadhana, and also how to be more serious and disciplined to manage time?
So there are two questions to it. First is how can I manage sadhana, and how do I balance or how do I manage time? Now, as a student, our first responsibility or our first commitment is towards our education. Bhakti is definitely important, but not at the cost of flunking in our grades. We are not expected to get 0 and 1 in our exams and then say, well, I'm practicing Bhakti. It doesn't work that way. We are not as exalted as Raghunath Das Goswami or Rupa Goswami or any of those acharyas. So we have to be a little practical and we have to give equal importance or a little more importance. When we are in our youth, we give more importance to our education, because once this phase goes away at 35 and 40 and 45, we cannot go back to the school. So now is the time when we prioritize education. So, but along with education, in the 365 days of an academic year, it's not going to be that all 365 days I am having homework and assignments and studying. There are going to be days where it's going to be really relaxed. And most of the days are actually relaxed. Only during the time of exams, we have assignments in projects and so many other things. But otherwise, most of the time, things are a little much relaxed. So as far as sadhana is concerned, what we can do is, first thing, if we can start getting up in the morning. This is the most important thing, because the amount of spiritual advancement we can make in morning cannot be compared to any other spiritual advancement in any other time of the day. Even for academic education, they always say that whatever you study in the morning, you can retain that better. Even for exams, you see, that is why most people get up in the morning and study. Why? Because the retaining power in the morning for the brain is the highest, unlike any other time of the day. So for our sadhana, first thing what we can do is start getting up in the morning. And there are so many japa Zoom calls that go around. We have the Zoom call of His Grace Anand Vrindavan Prabhu that is there in the morning. If you want devotee association, we have it that way. We have morning Zoom call of ISKCON of Atlanta, where devotees in the morning, they chant. We have the Zoom call of here of ISKCON of Seattle, where devotees chant in the morning. So we can pick Zoom calls like this so that we get association and we start chanting in the morning. The advantage of a Zoom call is, if we are not present in the Zoom call, then the other devotees know we are sleeping. So that they don't know we are sleeping, we are forced to get up in the morning. If there is no one to check, then we will always be very weak in bhakti. We will always be sleeping during morning. But if we have a Zoom call, we know that, okay, morning time, if I don't get up, my other devotee friends will know that so-and-so devotee is sleeping. So in that fear, we will get up every day in the morning. And this morning getting up is the means for making advancement. This is the first step in our sadhana. Everything else is secondary. First is getting up during Brahma Muhurta, either 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock or even 5:30, and chanting our 16 rounds during Brahma Muhurta. There are only two things we are supposed to do when we are in our youth. When we increase in age, we can take more responsibilities. But in youth, first is our education, the most important. And second, as far as sadhana is concerned, getting up in the morning and chanting our 16. And second, hearing at least one lecture, either of Srila Prabhupada or the disciples of Prabhupada. It can be a 1 hour lecture, it can be a 45-minute lecture, it can be a 30-minute lecture, doesn't mind. Hearing at least one minimum 30-minute lecture and getting up in the morning and chanting 16 rounds during Brahma Muhurta. As youth, if we can do these two aspects of sadhana, that is more than enough. As time progresses, slowly Krishna will give us the intelligence and empowerment to start reading more books and to start preaching and to start going more deeper in bhakti. But if all at one go we start doing, then it will become jack of all trades and master of none. So we don't want to become master of none. We want to become master of everything. And to become a master of everything, we take it one at a time, step by step. So first we prioritize our education. And as far as sadhana is concerned, we get up in the morning. So that is time prioritization, because in the morning, we don't study. We don't study in the morning. It is a known fact. I can say that because when I was a youth, I would not get up in the morning and study. Unless until someone is a university topper, most individuals, most youth I know are lazy enough to get up in the morning. They will not study in the morning. So that morning time is the phase when we give for chanting. If not 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. If not 4, 5:30. That is why in alarm you have snooze. We have alarm at 3 o'clock, we snooze. It goes to 4 o'clock, we snooze. Goes to 5 o'clock, we snooze. And that is why it is always said, if you snooze, you lose. Because if you snooze, you lose the time of Brahma Muhurta. You lose the time of chanting in the morning where you can make advancement. So you snooze, you lose. So never snooze your alarm in the morning. When it rings, get up, wash your face, brush your teeth, and start chanting. Even if you don't take bath for chanting, that is okay. That is completely fine. But just brush and wash your face and sit and start chanting in one place. Sit and chant 16 rounds. 5:30 to 7. And at night, when you come back from your school and everything is done, just a 30-minute lecture with your earphones, AirPods, whatever you have, your iPod, your mobile phone, just a 30-minute lecture. These two things, if you do, it is more than sufficient. in our present age. As we progress, we can start juggling more and more balls. But in this phase, we prioritize our education. No, we don't compromise our education, as Prabhupada said. We are serious in our education. We, as much as possible, try to get good grades and get up in the morning from 5:30 to 7 and chant. And in the morning and in the night, we hear before going to bed a 30-minute lecture. That's it. That's the two things that we can do as far as sadhana and prioritizing our time. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Unfortunately, there are many more questions, but because of time restraint, we cannot pursue that. So yes, thank you so much, Prabhuji, for this highly inspirational webinar. Thank you for sparing your valuable time and helping us to understand the meaning of this human life. Thank you for giving us the direction and hope on how to use this body and realize our ultimate goal. We would also want to share a good news with you all. Next week on Sunday 1st at August, we would be having your most awaited webinar on home deity worship by Grihasthas, which would be taken by His Grace, Janma Matiji from Pune. We request all to join on next Sunday at 5 p.m. IST. We thank you once again and request to have you in the future too. We would also like to thank all the participants. In case you would like to join us for more such webinars, please join us on our social media platforms such as WhatsApp, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. The links for which are given in the comment section. We thank you all once again. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.